afternoon to everyone watching us live through Zoom and Facebook, and welcome to the 5th edition of SCMAP Live. My name is Ana Rose Ochoa, Program Director of SCMAP, and your host for this afternoon. So SCMAP Live is our series of free online events where we explore what the so-called new normal means for us in the supply chain industry, and how we can best take advantage of the opportunities amidst this pandemic. In previous editions, we have tackled health and safety, transportation strategies, and the rise of e-commerce. If you have missed any of these events, you can still watch them in full on SCMAP's YouTube channel. Just search for SCMAP Live. So today we will look at the preparedness of the supply chain sector to tackle challenges in trade in the coming months. With world economy slowly recovering and a potential COVID-19 vaccine in the horizon, are we ready to step up to the plate, fulfill our customers' needs, and work towards economic recovery and perhaps a return to some sort of normal? This is an exciting afternoon, and we have invited stakeholders from government and the private sector for their valuable insights and fresh perspectives. But before that, here to welcome you to this event is the President-elect of the Supply Chain Management Association of the Philippines and the Vice President for Business Solutions of XDC Logistics, Mr. Pierre, Carlo, Curay.
Hello, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today as we tackle another very important supply chain industry questions and all. First and foremost, I'd like to thank especially our speakers who are here right now, who's going to share their knowledge and expertise later on. But before that, let me just share what we have been doing in just the past few months. So just two main things actually. SCMAP is hard at work to really help expand the industry, okay? So just, I think just last month, we had our SCC Supply Chain Conference. Now, we went live just because because it is the new normal. So our usual conference was moved into an online conference, and it was very successful actually. We tackled different perspectives. Initially on the first day, talked about what is the current reality and what's going to be happening in the new normal. And then on the second day with industry experts, we talked about how to improve the supply chain processes with technology, through supply chain alignment and all this stuff. And then on the third day, it gave us a perspective how we can move on to the future. So for those who wants to learn a lot, even I myself attended in the conference, learned so much on it. So I would invite everybody to go to our page at scmap.org, where you can register to still watch on demand the conference that just happened. So, and then another thing, another update we have is we represented the Philippines in the recent Asian Logistics Maritime Innovation Conference. So yours truly was invited to talk about the current landscape and the close work between private and government partners to improve our industry. So I think the main difference now is a strong support from government in collaboration to help us improve our logistics infrastructure and hopefully improve our competitiveness among the region. And I also share that the huge opportunities in e-commerce, especially where the Philippines is still low in terms of adoption of e-commerce. So we're really looking forward to that. So now, let me bring you live to SCMAP, this SCMAP event. We are joined by the Bureau of Customs Assistant Commissioner, Attorney Vincent Philip Maronilla, and then, of course, our friends from the Philippine Multimodal Transport and Logistics Association, Ms. Marilyn, Alberto, and also from Academy of Development Logistics, Ambassador Samuel Bautista. So I don't have words to find how can I describe this? Because these are experts in their field. I look up to them and I learn from them each time I listen to their talks. So we're very fortunate to have them here to share their thoughts and experience and wisdom to help improve our own expertise in our industry. Again, thank you very much for joining us and looking forward to this event right now. Thank you. Oh, Chi, naka-mute.
Sorry. Thank you again, Carlo, for your presentation and update. Before we proceed, we would like to remind our participants via Zoom that you can raise your questions throughout the afternoon by using the Q&A function of your Zoom app. We will have an open forum after all of our speakers are presented. And if you want to ask your questions through audio or video, you may raise your hand through the app and we will get in touch with you as soon as possible. So if you're watching on Facebook, you can also post your questions as a comment on the live stream. So now that our economy continues to contract as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and its resulting restrictions on movement and activities, in the third quarter of the year, our GDP shrank by 11.5% after a record 16.9% fall in the previous quarter. However, there have been efforts to further reopen the economy and resume more business activities. Already, malls are busier and e-commerce continues to surge as Filipinos make the most of an extraordinary Christmas season. As the economy starts to look up, the focus is now on the Philippine supply chain sector. So will it be able to cope with the increasing demand, particularly for products from outside the country? Has it taken advantage of the past few months to rethink and reboot? Are we up for the task? The supply chain sector is also it's in sharp focus as potential vaccines against COVID-19 comes up on the horizon. The Philippines is most definitely going to import a vaccine once it is approved for use. And that would mean a complex supply chain operation to ensure that every Filipino receives a life-saving drug. We hope to tackle the vaccine's demand on cold chain in future events. But for now, we will also focus on whether our ports are ready to fulfill their role in this gargantuan undertaking. We have with us respected industry leaders and government officials to share their insights on whether Philippine supply chain is ready for these challenges. Our first speaker is the Director and General Manager of ADLI Philippines and the President of the Philippine Multimodal Transport and Logistics Association. So ladies and gentlemen, please, let's give a warm virtual round of applause for Ms. Marilyn Alberto.
Thank you, Ochi. Well, actually, I've had a significant number of speaking engagements, but you know, this one I find a little bit intimidating. Number one, because this is SCMAP, no? The National Organization of Supply Chain Experts. And number two, because of the topic, it says understanding our trade challenges. I was thinking, what else do I need to tell you about, you know, these trade challenges? Because you've been experiencing them actually day in and day out. So, but I cannot refuse the invitation of your leaders because, you know, we've been working together in the Logistics Services Philippines, in the LSPH group to help address the pain points that we are all facing in the supply chain and in the logistics industry. Therefore, I will be talking about things that may just reconfirm what you already know, and I will focus on international air transport, and on international transport by air and sea. And hopefully my talk can also be a source of new information since these are called from official publications of international organizations that are continuously engaged in the monitoring of international transport developments. I will also be touching on the COVID-19 vaccine transportation, which will be one of the greatest logistical challenges that we will be facing. So let me share my presentation. All right, so let's take a look at air transport and the airline industry on the global level. COVID-19 is the biggest shock that shook the aviation industry since World War II, with global revenue passenger kilometers shrinking by an average of 66% in 2020. Of course, this means people just stopped traveling, and suddenly the regular passengers for the scheduled flights were no longer there. When there's no demand, flights had to be grounded. As you can see here, airlines, a significant chunk of revenues come from passengers. So what happens now is that airlines survive from government aid and from cash raised from capital markets, adding more than $220 billion to their debts. Even with the recovery of the global economy, boosting air cargo, air travel simply has not taken off due to obvious reasons: health protection considerations for passengers themselves, and of course the governments. And the second waves and renewed lockdowns are certainly not helping at all. I do not want to sound like an official apologist for airlines, but I just want to stress the point that they are bleeding profusely. Even with the forecasted reduction in losses in 2021, they still have to grapple with an estimated $38 billion in losses. So let us take a look at the local scenario. As of August, number of flights are still at about almost 80% below 2019 levels. MIAA has not updated their data yet, but the number of scheduled flights have been slowly increasing from August levels, but still not significant enough to be able to handle the demand for air freight. However, as you can see in this graph, in terms of tonnage, we will see that as of August, we are just 27% below 2019 levels for air export. And I think the gap is going to be smaller as we go along, because right now we are handling a lot of cargo by air. And for import tonnage, we were just 12% short of 2019 levels. So how did this happen? How could we handle such volume of cargo with a limited number of scheduled flights? We use a significant number of freighters and what we call now the freighter, which means passenger aircrafts that are changed into cargo aircrafts and cargo in cabin flights. Up to now, we are chartering a significant number of flights to be able to transport the urgent shipments of our clients. So what lies ahead for international air freight transport? So we can still already expect improvement in the tight supply of space, but until the belly capacity of passenger aircrafts come back to scale, then we will still continue to have tight space. Rate agreements will be short-term. We will continue the use of charter flights. And this is one thing for sure. All my friends from the airline industry tell me, rates will never go back to pre-COVID levels. And of course, as COVID-19 vaccine transportation starts, we will be competing on limited space. According to experts, rather than a short frantic rush to supply vaccines around the world within days, the global distribution will be an extended effort. And this is not just, they say, a 4-week effort, but could be an 18-month project. So what must you do? At this point, you have no choice but to accept high air freight prices or shift your supply chain to other modes of transport. You must also hone your long-term forecasting skills, because there will be no idle capacity sitting around in case you got your forecast wrong. The movement of vaccine, they say, would require about 8,000 big freighters. But as we've said, it will take time. Even if there's extra income that our airlines can get, it is estimated that they can only recover by 2024. So that means that's the time that we have to wait for before we can really enjoy better rates from the airlines. So now let's go to international sea transport. The pandemic has sent shockwaves through global maritime transport, and in the Review of Maritime Transport 2020 by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, they estimated that global maritime trade will plunge by 4.1% in 2020 due to the unprecedented disruption caused by COVID-19. And however, they are expecting maritime trade growth to return to a positive territory and expand by 4.8% in 2021, assuming world economic output recovers. So you can see here the ratio of the difference between the increase or decrease in gross domestic product and seaborne trade growth. You can see here that basically it's the container trade that has significantly gone down. And you can see in terms of container traffic here in the Philippines, we're still slightly negative, but not very far behind already by third quarter 2019 volumes. And in fact, in terms of foreign ship calls, we have already, compared to third quarter 2019, we already have a 14% growth. And this is mainly because of, bulk cargo. Because as you can see here, there has been an increase in our importation in terms of volumes. So what are the challenges in sea transport? How did the carriers respond to the pandemic? What they did was tight capacity and rate management. So they suspended services, they blanked their sailings, they rerouted their vessels. And what resulted from those actions? For carriers, they, unlike the airlines which were bleeding, shipping lines never had it so good. They enjoyed strong profitability amid the global recession. In an article that I just recently read, one carrier reported that for the 9-month period, their net profit was $751 million compared with a loss of $107 million the year in 2019, even with just a 1% increase in volumes handled. So the 75% of the profit was realized in the third quarter, and they're saying that they had a 1,100% increase of profit compared to the same period last year. They said that it was due to a 6.8% decline in unit cost, mainly in fuel, but definitely combined with rate increases for the shippers. So what happened is that our shippers suffered and actually still suffering from disruption of service levels. There are delays, rollovers. We're still experiencing space and equipment shortage, especially to the Trans-Pacific route. Rate levels are still, especially to the Trans-Pacific route and to Europe, rate levels are going up. And if you want to get priority for loading or even for to get space, you have to pay premium rates. So what lies ahead for international sea freight transport? Well, volumes will remain brisk through the Chinese New Year. There will be uncertain demand from recession-hit consumers in 2021. So rate levels will still remain volatile on all major trades. But one thing is for sure, according to the carriers, capacity management strategies, which means the limiting of the space that are available, are here to stay. And shippers will need to find ways to work within the adjusted networks. In some cases, the higher pricing trends may be the new normal. And actually, the rates may not come down to pre-COVID levels. So what can you do? What you need to do, of course, is carefully assess the varied options in adjusting your chain or changing your supply chain designs. I'm sure you're already experts in this by like shortening the supply chain by nearshoring and managing your risk through multi-sourcing. The figures will show that most actually of the international maritime trade is now in our region in Asia. And of course, you also have to improve your forecasting of volumes and shipment patterns so that you can negotiate ahead for the space that you will need. Improve visibility and agility of door-to-door transport operations. And further investments in digitalization so that, and also automation. And of course, closer relationships with your service providers so that you can hand in hand help each other in trying to find space at the best price possible for your shipments. So now let me talk a little about vaccine transportation. So there's been a fast-track development of vaccines, and there's limited time for logistics players to strategize, deploy adequate infrastructure, and develop required skills and processes. And right now, there are many types of vaccines and manufacturers in the race. There's about, I think, 80 yata. No? So, and what do shippers want from logistics providers? Speed, security, reliability, transparency. And what logistics providers need from pharma shippers would be the product specifications, the size and packaging, the volumes, where will it be coming from, where will it go, and the list of monitoring devices. So the International Air Cargo Association, or TIACA, an organization representing shippers, freight forwarders, ground handlers, airports, airlines, manufacturers, as well as solution providers, and Pharma Aero, a cross-industry collaboration of certified cargo communities, airport operators, and other air cargo industry stakeholders, conducted a survey in September. And actually, they're coming up with a second survey by the end of November. So, so this is the breakdown of the respondents: 30% freight forwarders, 26% airlines, 12% ground handlers, airport operators 14%, and solution providers like, for the packaging, 18%. And you can see here that a concerning lack of readiness for COVID-19 vaccine logistics. Only 28% of the industry felt that they were well prepared. And actually, it's the ground handlers and airports that feel less prepared than forwarders and airlines overall. So these are the stakeholders that we really need to look into. I talked to Pierre Cargo, our biggest cargo handler or ground handling operator in the NAIA, and they advised that they are actually planning to expand their cold chain storage. But as to how big it is and how it matches the volumes that are expected, we cannot tell. And it says here that companies already engaging the vaccine manufacturers feel much more prepared for the incoming challenge of COVID-19 vaccine logistics. So it's very important for the vaccine manufacturers to already involve their service providers. And of course, the sooner, the better. These are the main risks, real or perceived, that were seen by the stakeholders. Possible temperature excursions, lack of visibility, lack of adequate infrastructure, capacity shortage, unexpected delays, end-to-end connectivity, security, and cost. But however, the professional air cargo handlers, of course, are already starting to training more staff and setting up 24/7 control towers to handle irregularities. As advised, some airlines are already planning to add cargo capacity and they need also to start engaging whoever is in charge of facilitating approval of additional charter flights and planning special slots. And of course, in the case of the government, they must also consider mapping the current capabilities at origin, transit, and destination points. Expanding cargo facilities to include new cold storage infrastructure and securing availability of containers and dry ice space, and the use of encouraging use of monitoring devices. So the stakeholders are actually willing to make investments to be able to handle COVID-19 transportation. And the respondents, although the respondents does not include the Philippines, most of them, the big airports and ground handlers, are actually ready to handle temperature controlled shipments because they have the adequate infrastructure and SOPs for their staff. But I don't think this holds true for many airports in many countries. So what is important is for good combination of people, infrastructure standards, and packaging to make things right in the transportation of cargoes, of the vaccines. And this is a possible distribution model for the COVID-19 vaccine that was prepared by Pfizer. But we think that, I think Pfizer vaccines are more difficult to handle because of the requirement of -60 to 80 degrees. So maybe it would be more prudent for our government to consider, I think they are considering another vaccine supplier, which would have less stringent temperature requirements. So what is needed would be, of course, industry collaboration, visibility and transparency, capabilities scale up, support from regulators, and support from NGOs. Talking about industry collaboration, IATA just came out with their guidance for vaccine and pharmaceutical logistics and distribution. The inputs came from different international associations, one of which is the International Federation of Freight Forwarders Associations, wherein PMTLAI is a member. And these are the summary of considerations: capacity and connectivity, operational environment, border management, security environment, safety environment, risk management, digital environment, sustainability, and multimodal distribution. So I actually shared here the link for the complete details of this guidance, so you can do your, you can read by yourselves and get more information on these guidelines. This is a live documentary where they will be continuing to improve. So thank you very much, and I hope that I have been able to impart additional knowledge to everyone.
Okay, thank you very much, Marilyn, for that very informative presentation. And we are assured of efforts being done by the government and private sector to assure us that it's available. We are ready for it. Okay, thank you very much again, Marilyn. So once again, if you have any questions, you can enter them through the Q&A function of our Zoom app, and we will get to them at the open forum later. So we move now to our next speaker. So our next speaker will look at these challenges from a regulatory angle. He is the president of LGC Logistics and Chief Learning Officer of the Academy of Developmental Logistics. He was also a director of the Chamber of Customs Brokers and is part of the efforts to move forward customs education in the country and around the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Ambassador Samuel Bautista.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Uchi, for the introduction. And tawag po nila sa akin is Ambassador, no? Following also yung tawag sa akin ni Asep Chin Pacheco of the TI, primarily because I'm doing a lot of work in the international arena, especially on the side of trade and on the side of customs. And I'm a foreign service officer, but I did not join the ranks in the DFA because I think I can do more working in the private sector with all the efforts that we've been doing in aligning the Philippines regulatory framework with the standards also and the best practices all around the world. And I'll be focusing my presentation on that. Marilyn have shared with us a very broad perspective of what we would expect in the transportation and logistics arena. But of course, it's very important now that we are discussing about the new developments with the COVID-19 vaccines coming out. It's very important that we also look into the logistics challenges that might be upfront because we're talking about the vaccine and the cost of having that vaccine, but we have to factor in also what would be the cost of bringing the vaccine to us, considering that it's being manufactured abroad and that it has to be moved from where is it being manufactured now and bring it to our people here, not only in the metropolis, but the challenge also is in bringing it to those in the far-flung areas, you know, of our country. So we have more than 7,100 islands, and to give vaccines to more than 100 million people in the Philippines, if everybody will get the vaccine. So it's really a challenge on logistics. So I thank SCMAP, our President Christine, and our President-elect Carlo, Curay, our Executive Director Cora, and also Nico providing the technicals, and our moderator now, Uchi. And for all those who are tuned in right now in the Zoom and in Facebook Live of SCMAP, maraming salamat po sa inyong time. And we hope that we would be able to share our perspective on the topic in SCMAP Live today, understanding our trade challenges. As mentioned by Marilyn, you know, so almost all of these challenges, we've been through this, you know, even prior to the pandemic, we've been talking, we've been meeting several years back, looking at all these challenges and working with other sectors and working with the government also on how are we going to address this. So as a start, these are some of the things we've been discussing prior to the pandemic. These are the trade issues that we would like to be considered always. When we talk about trade transaction costs, we talk about border controls because we're dealing with the rest of the world in terms of our importation and exportation. We have to deal with taxes, customs duties, and the factors on trade security, and of course, trade financing. And all of these trade transactions that we've been doing, of course, most of the time, you know, we have delays, and of course, yung cost component ng delays. So these are some of the sources of delay and costs in terms of document and information requirements, the border procedures and controls, not only of customs, but also of the different, of the various government regulatory agencies. And Marilyn talked about transparency a while ago. So there are lack of transparency sometimes in other agencies, and also the predictability. We will have some regulations issued now, and when it comes to operational procedures, there will be difference in terms of the implementing guidelines and implementation down the line. So these are things that we would like to be addressed. And of course, very important is looking into the current processes. Are all these processes still manual and paper-based? Are we really moving towards digital and automated processes? And attendant to that are the administrative fees and charges, and of course our own expense in attending to this manual and paper-based processing and documentation. Now, all of you are aware of this already. We have the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement that entered into force February of 2017, exactly on the February 22, when 2/3 of the WTO membership signed and completed their domestic ratification process. So the Philippines acceded to TFA already, even prior to 2017. And we have made a lot of alignments also. For example, on the side of customs, we pass into law a new customs modernization bill. We call it CMTA, or Customs Modernization and Tariff Act, in 2016. And we are still continuing issuing the implementing rules and regulations. I will not jump into the presentation of Attorney Jet Maronilla, Assistant Commissioner Jet Maronilla, who will be presenting later on what the Bureau of Customs is doing right now in terms of our compliance to TFA and other accord related to customs, like the revised Kyoto Convention. So the TFA is divided into 3 major sections. So we have sections 1, 2, and 3. And section 1 are the more comprehensive sections of the TFA, because it contains 35 technical measures that are applicable not only to customs but to all border agencies. And then section 2 speaks about special concessions for developing and least developed countries. And the last section is about committees and the final provision. So in terms of committees, as we have verified based on information that we got, the Philippine National Trade Facilitation Committee will be established soon, hopefully, because the executive order creating that committee is now in Malacanang Palace, waiting for the signature of the president. And we hope that the constitution, the composition of the NTFCs for the Philippines will include members from the private sector, especially from trade, and also from the service providers like our Association of Freight Forwarders, the customs brokers. So we submitted our position also on that, based on the guidelines also provided by WTO and the World Customs Organization on the recommended composition of the National Trade Facilitation Committee. The NTFC will be given primary tasks of really creating our trade facilitation plan. So it will be encompassing all the other agencies. So it's a whole of government approach on how we should really facilitate trade and encourage more businesses to go into business, especially when we go back to normal condition after this pandemic. So the technical measures in section 1, there are 3 types of technical measures that are focused on the modernized border procedures and controls, transparency and fairness, and of course governance. And in terms of notification, in terms of the implementation notifications that we send to the World Trade Organization, there are categories A, B, C. So the Philippines notified 93.3% of category A provisions already. Category B is 0.0% and C is 1.7%. So the remaining notifications implementation in category C, this is actually the implementation due date was moved to June 2022. It's about the establishment or the creation of a national single window for the Philippines. Now they call it the TradeNet platform. And we have some notifications in terms of border agency cooperation on enhanced control or inspections that are due December of this year. And the rejected goods on category V, it's already implemented as it reaches its due date on December 2019. So as you will see, even during the pandemic period, so we see a lot of customs administrative orders and customs memorandum orders issued to implement the provisions of CMTA between March and now. And for example, I was in talks to some of our customs officers yesterday in some consultations that we're doing. And they are continuously doing public hearings, although virtually, for the new issuances that is being drafted and being reviewed before finally signed by the Commissioner and the Secretary of Finance and issued by the Bureau of Customs. So we are also doing some works through the help of World Bank in assisting agencies, border agencies like Customs, DA, and other regulatory agencies in reviewing their existing regulations, whether these are aligned or this needs to be reviewed and revised in conformance to our commitments in the trade facilitation agreement. And maybe you heard about the customs modernization program. Probably Attorney Jet Maronilla would be able to give some more information on that. The World Bank already approved the facility, the loan facility for customs modernization. And in support of the TFA, the World Customs Organization, where the Philippines is one among the members, the WCO launched its website dedicated to the implementation guidance for the TFA. And they have a program called the WCO Mercator program. And as I understand, beginning last year, the Philippines started doing the program already under the WCO Mercator program, and this is ongoing exercise as well. So the WCO is monitoring also how Philippine Customs is adapting and implementing the commitments to support the trade facilitation agreement. Now, COVID-19, of course, brought to us a different perspective, and it changed the way we do things. And beginning January 2020, we already see a lot of changes in terms of border control and in travels, especially in international travels, when WHO declares the health emergency. And on March 2020, that's the beginning of the pandemic and leading to the lockdown. And of course, disruptions in our supply chain activities. And there are a lot of concerns raised on public health. And of course, uncertainty sets in during the initial implementation of the lockdowns. So here in the Philippines, so we have a lot of terminologies in terms of lockdown. So we have several levels of the community quarantine like ECQ, MGCQ, but all of this refers to the lockdowns. Now, of course, there were challenges that emerged because of the COVID-19, and some of these are written here. So, of course, there are health issues and critical supplies became rare and very hard to get during the initial stage. Of course, supply chain have to react on that. And we have issues also in terms of labor and human resource because we cannot let full force to report to work. So we have to strategize on how we are going to let our people come to our workplaces and offices. If they are going to do work from home arrangements, of course, there are challenges as well because of the issues in our connectivities, or probably issues also in terms of assets that need to be provided to them. They have to be provided with gadgets like laptops or computers for them to be able to connect to the office and still do work that can be done offsite. And there are compliance issues, especially if we are dealing with regulatory agencies and some of the offices are closed. How are we going to process permits? Because there are agencies probably that may have a computerized system but not fully automated, or a combination of computerized system and a manual system. And the logistics issues, of course, in terms of transport, movement of our assets. Our trucks have to cross domestic borders. Aside from international borders, we have to comply with the protocols and requirements of the different LGUs, for example, or even movement from here to other countries. And of course, our regulatory agencies, particularly customs, still have to put controls because illicit activities are still there in terms of monitoring and watching our borders also in terms of movement of illicit goods. So there was a shift from business as usual to prioritization. And these things have to go hand in hand because still, of course, we have to maintain our businesses. We have to keep moving, but we have to identify which are our priorities. So these are the response, of course, from the trade and logistics due to the disruptions. Our response are centered around three major areas in terms of communication and sharing of information. So these are things that we're doing now with our partners. We strengthen our partnerships. And a while ago, Marilyn mentioned about really putting our people into training. That's part of capacity building. And this is actually what we are doing now. We are learning and relearning. So we have more sessions now actually focus on understanding what we are doing now, what we have to do in the future. We have a lot of webinars. So prior to the start of this webinar, so we had conversations and we really focus on a lot of issues. We have more meetings actually now. We have more learning sessions now. Focus on capacity building. So I have here a slide showing several references. This is a slide I presented in February of this year. Prior to the pandemic, I attended the Humanitarian Network and Partnership Week in Geneva as part of my activities also. I'm a member of the technical working group in United Nations. We call it the Impact Group, Importation and Clearance Together. This is our logo, Impact. We call it Impact. And focusing on the Philippines regulatory framework, looking at how prepared the Philippines in terms of regulatory framework in responding to humanitarian relief or clearance of humanitarian goods. So I summarize here what are available on the international standards or international references based on the accord also that the Philippines acceded to and signed, and what are also available in the regional level, especially in ASEAN, and what are the laws on the national level, and focusing on what we have on the side of customs. So on the international side, of course, we have specific chapters in the revised Kyoto Convention. We have the Istanbul Convention on temporary admission of relief consignments. Also, some recommendations in 1970s when the WCO is still called CCCN. And in 2011, there was a council resolution issued on the role of customs in natural disaster relief. Also, the safe framework of standards in securing and facilitating global trade. The safe framework of standards was actually created after the 9/11 attacks in the United States. And of course, we have the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, also the IDRL guidelines from the Red Cross, and the United Nations Model Agreement on Customs Facilitation. Also, I added here the framework of standards on cross-border e-commerce because we've seen how e-commerce really explode during the time of pandemic. So we're doing a lot of online purchases. I'll be sharing with you another reference on that at the later part of my presentation. On the regional level, of course, we have the ASEAN Agreement, particularly the establishment of the ASEAN Humanitarian Affairs Center. This is based in Indonesia. We have a committee on disaster management. Also, the Philippines have a bilateral agreement with Japan in terms of communications. That's the ITU agreement on disaster communication. On the national level, the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction Management Act of 2010. Now it's 10-year-old already. So a week ago, I was talking to Senator Joey Lina during his radio program on Sundays. He was discussing about disaster management, and I look into the law because there is a provision in our Disaster Management Act that it should be reviewed after 5 years. So there's a sunset provision for the review. I know there were reviews made already, but the update to our PDRRM law hindi pa po siya napapas ng ating Congress. Also, we have the IRR for that law, and there are, of course, regulations issued enhancing the PHARC OSS, yung pong ating one-stop shop. And on the customs side, of course, the CMTA have specific provisions on how are we going to address clearance of humanitarian goods, and discovers, of course, a lot of goods that were release and that arrived during the pandemic, yung po mga ginagamit natin sa ating mga hospitals, yung mga gamot, mga PPEs. So this is part of this processes. And last March, I think March 16, that's the date I saw in the joint administrative order. Finally, the joint administrative order 1-2020 was signed by the different agencies, by the different departments. That includes DOF, DTI, DSWD, DA, and all other agencies involved on the clearance of relief consignment entered during a state of calamity. So this is very important. So prior to my travel to Geneva on February, prior to that a week prior to that, I met the review team of the Bureau of Customs doon po sa mga IRRs, and that's where I get an update from them that the DAO, the JAO, or the Joint Administrative Order, is already finalized and just waiting for the signatures of the secretaries. And finally, prior to the declaration of ECQ, ilabas po yung ating Joint Administrative Order 1-2020. And following that as well, we get an updated CAO. Yung pong ating tax and duty exempt importations na dati po doon sa mga brokers na nakikinig ngayon, yung Section 105 of the Tariff and Customs Code, yung dati nating batas. Meron din pong lumang CAO na na-issue doon. But since in the new CMTA, nandun na siya sa Section 800, so there was a new CAO that was issued, yung CAO 06-2020. And after yung ating Bayanihan to Heal as One Act, na ilabas po na pirmahan ng ating Presidente, Customs also issued another CAO 07-2020 on the tax and duty exempt importations under Section 4 of the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act. Now, in terms of references, so we're talking about a lot of partnerships, yung responses ng mga agencies din natin, not only in national levels but in international levels. So there are information sharing. So the WTO created a dedicated page in their website. So they have the COVID-19 Trade Facilitation Resource Repository. So the link is here, and I'll be sending this presentation to SCMAP later, so it can be given to you as well sa mga nakikinig po. And you can browse through a lot of references available here. And also the World Customs Organization has a dedicated page also on the COVID-19 references. This is the link. So what you can see in the WCO webpage on COVID-19, they have the various WCO instruments and tools. So for example, in coordination with WHO, WCO issued this as early as March, yung listahan po ito, yung HS classification reference for COVID-19 medical supplies. So para hindi na po mahirapan yung mga nag-i-import, saka po yung customs to look into the right harmonized system classification for these medical supplies. So meron na po listahan, and this has been updated also. I think this is the third version, 3.01 edition as of June 2, 2020. Also, there are lists of priority medicines for customs during COVID-19 pandemic. So ito yung mga listahan na pag kayo po nag-i-import ng mga medicines na to at nandito sa listahan. So customs knows already, these are priorities na hindi dapat patagalin. Also, WCO Secretariat note Some of the guidelines are here. Yung mga sinabi ko pong references kanina can be found also here. And yung information sharing na minention ko kanina, WCO members practice in the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So ano po yung ginawa ng various border agencies, primarily customs in other countries, para doon sa pag-respond nila doon sa movement of goods, cross-border movement of goods, especially importation for COVID-19. So, for example, sa Saudi Arabia, because marami silang funds, so ang importation sa Saudi during the pandemic, they can actually re-clear the goods and pay the duties and taxes later. Yun po ang in-offer sa kanila sa trading community. Of course, may mga in-issue po ng mga joint administrative orders together with DTI, Customs, PPA, and to address po yung mga processes natin. So for example, yung latest na JAW na in-spearhead po ng ARTA is on the focusing on digitalization. Some of the aspects of processing at saka yung mga payment systems like sa ICTSI, ATI ngayon. So, unti-unti yung payment natin, nawala na yung over-the-counter. Over-the-counter will be an option. Ang primary payment system natin ngayon is through digital payments. So, based on the experiences of various countries as shared, ano po yung lessons learned? First and foremost, preparedness is very important. So, business continuity plan, contingencies should not be a primary concern only of the private sector. So, pati yung government sector, kailangan naka-prepare din. Kasi hindi natin alam what other calamities will hit us. So, for example, we have the pandemic and still we have the typhoons, which we cannot prevent because year in, year out, talaga pong halos inuubos natin yung ating A, B, C, D, yung ating alphabets doon sa dami ng mga typhoons na dumadaan sa atin. And sa total typhoons na dumadaan sa atin, about 3 or 4 of those typhoons talaga pong malakas. And lately, yung nangyari sa atin again, yung flooding. And streamlining and simplifying procedures. This is very important. Streamlining and simplifying procedures not only of customs, but all the other agencies involved. And even the private sector kasama dito. So for example, we're dealing with shipping lines. Private to diba? Are they really looking into their processes also? Are they streamlining? Are they simplifying their procedures? Diba? Na para hindi na yung mga tao ng mga brokers and mga forwarders maaga pipila doon sa location kung nasaan yung mga opisina nila and pipila sa pagbayad, pipila sa pagpasa ng documents, pipila sa pag-refund ng container deposits. So, streamlining and simplifying procedures across the board po ito. So, even doon sa ating mga internal processes, dapat siguro tingnan din natin, baka meron pa tayong masisimplify at may streamline. And communication, as I mentioned kanina, and coordination is very important. So we have to bring everybody involved in the process into one table. Ngayon po, okay lang mag-meeting, di ba? Okay lang magsigawan sa meeting. Okay lang magsalita ng diretso kasi hindi naman magkakaharap. But of course, it's very important to express what we see is not good in the system. What we see should be changed in the system. And everything should be coordinated. So for example, you're moving goods. You have a truck traveling from north to south. At kung merong mga borders, coordinated ba yung borders, di ba? From north, halimbawa, pagpasok ko ng Manila, ilang checkpoint ang dadaanan ko hanggang makarating ako sa Batangas. But if these things are coordinated, kung meron tayong isang pass, halimbawa, na pagkuha ko dun sa origin, all the way to my destination, yun na yung pass na dala-dala ko. Diba? So, yun po yung isa sa mga aspeto ng coordination na pinag-uusapan natin. And then, Marilyn also mentioned about transparency kanina. Everything should be transparent, especially kung may mga bagong regulations na lalabas. And lastly, yung pong digitalization. We've seen that the pandemic really pushed a lot of agencies, a lot of businesses to go digital. And we hope if they go through the digital process, that will be the new norm. Hindi na babalik doon sa manual. Hindi siya yung magiging stopgap measures. So talagang if the digital process is there already and it's working and it still can be improved, so the digitalization processes will stay. And lastly, I mentioned about an additional reference on e-commerce. This was released last month by NEDA and the World Bank, the Philippines Digital Economy Report for our businesses who are doing digital business now, moving their stores in the digital space. So you can look into the various chapters in this report. And there is one specific report on logistics, the state of logistics for small parcels in the Philippines. That's in chapter 4. And this is the link in accessing the report from the World Bank. And with this, I'm ending my presentation, and maraming salamat po. And if there are questions, we will entertain that during the open forum. Back to you, Ochi.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sam, for the wealth of information you shared during your presentation. And what I like is that you also shared some lessons, no? So I took some of them here, like preparation is key. We must keep on simplifying and streamlining our processes, collaboration and coordination within the supply chain network and across borders, transparency and digitalization. So thank you very much, Sam. So now we move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is the past president of the Supply Chain Management Association of the Philippines, and he is currently the head for Intermarket Material Management of Nestlé Philippines. He will present the end user's perspective on these challenges. So let us all give a virtual round of applause to Mr. Dennis Llovido.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My presentation will be very short. So it focus on the shipper's perspective. What have we done so far, and how did we address our issues on import-export imbalance for our transactions? So let's start first. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. So just it's more of an executive summary of what we've seen, the several relevant events leading to what we are experiencing now, and we are also foreseeing that it might extend till 2021. So let's start first with the impact of COVID with the global shipping. So it reduced approximately around 15 to 20% of the total global capacity. And this was even worsened when China's economies bounced back wherein they're catching up their backlogs from previous months, thus increasing their volume to an additional 10% versus comparing it to 2019. With these imbalances, the rates are also increasing. I think it was also mentioned by Miss Marilyn that some of the rates, particularly for the shipping, are also increasing. What we experienced so far is other routes outside of what we agreed with the shipping lines are asking even a spot rate of as high as 130%. The worst is actually the one we experienced for Australia, wherein it drives the rate until to 300% when it comes to the shipping cost to the Philippines or to any other markets within Nestle. For the container availability, it's very critical, which I have a slide later on of the container availability in Asia. Particularly for the 40-footer high cube. I mean, everybody wants to use 40-footer high cube, and it's been like the trend for the past 2 years. But it's very critical for now. There was also reported congestions in Australia, New Zealand, India, and recently in Malaysia that actually affected the turnaround within Asia. There were also export increases from Asia to North America, thus actually resulting to chassis shortage in North America. Adding actually to these issues on freight rates and service levels, we experienced the CMA cyber attack last September, October. So just a brief summary of what we experienced in the past months, and we have a detailed presentations or charts in each of the slides. Nico, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so what we did is come up with the global schedule reliability. So let's just focus on the purple one, which is 2020. As you can see that during the pandemic, especially from June, July, it's actually depends when it comes to service reliability. Shipping line service drive became even worse starting July of this year. The worst, as you can see in the graph, is actually in September, when actually it was dipped to around 56% schedule reliability. A lot of blank sailing, rerouting, canceled routes, cargoes stopped at the transshipment points. A typical example of this is actually our cargoes going to Cagayan de Oro. From before, they used to have like 3 to 4 frequencies every month. Now it actually down to around 1 to 2. So that's why some of our cargoes are actually stuck at the transshipment points. What's even worse, which actually we put down on the third bullet, is that it was even worse because of the typhoon season. There were even reported port congestion, strikes, and what actually makes it worse is that because we have quarantine procedures and we have to request changes in the crew every time a ship docks in a particular location. So that's actually worse than the service or the schedule reliability of our shipping lines. Can you go to the next slide, Nico? I just took this from Agility. So this is showing the global capacity as of today. So as you can see, the ones in yellow are the ones we have issues in global capacity. The worst is actually the one in orange, which is actually India. So they actually experience shortage in capacity for the past months already. But what good to note here is actually for the Philippines, despite issues that we're facing when it comes to shortage of or delayed shipments, we still have the capacity, and it's still being considered as an okay status with still available capacity for our export. Though there are routes that are actually difficult, like for example for Malaysia, shipping lines are actually limiting our bookings to, from before we used to have 10. Now they're limiting it to 2 per shipment. So we need to look for other shipping lines who can actually accommodate the other volumes. Okay, so next slide, please. So this is what I've mentioned to you a while ago. So if you look at the container availability across all, so what we did was we look at the total Asia. So we have the North Asia, East Asia, and the South Asia. And we look at the type of containers on that one. So when it comes to 20-footer, there's no issue actually about it. So we have enough from most of the shipping lines. The problem really lies on the 40-footer high cube. So that's why if your cargoes are always linked to, are always using 40-footer high cube, we might need to reconsider using either 2x20 or 1x40 regular, so that your shipment will not be affected as well. So equipment situation in most Asian locations is becoming a challenge. So China outports and South Asian ports are particularly dynamic. So as I mentioned, so 40-footer high cube, it's very high demand. Philippines, for example, we have issues on 40-footer high cube for our exports. That's why we're shifting now even to regular 40-footer. China is also been affected. Our malto suppliers or our glucose suppliers are already asking to use a regular container instead of 40-footer high cube because of these issues on availability. Next slide, please. And just to give you a summary of the port congestion in the Philippines. So we have a lot of port congestion across Asia Pacific. This is expected to remain until end of the year. So Malaysia in particular, which I mentioned a while ago, so is experiencing around 12 to 15 hours delays due to low productivity. The Singapore ports as well as the Vietnam ports is experiencing 2 to 4 days delay. Indonesia is also experiencing 1-day delay, but the latest information is that they're having an issue when it comes to vessel space and container availability. So that's why going out of Indonesia is also a challenge now. Thailand, we also got reports that they also have 3 days reported delays. Korea is around 2 to 3 days delay. For Manila, as of October 30, the one reported is around 1 to 2 days delays. Not considering, of course, the delays that we experienced because of the Typhoon Rolly. The rest of the Chinese ports, including Hong Kong, are also facing like 3 to 5 days average delays. The worst is actually as well in Australia, wherein it's around 5 to 1 week delays, which is actually expected until year end. And if you look at the chart itself, Philippines is still on the blue. It's actually rated as a blue. We call it because it's still rated as moderate, and the rest of the Asian markets are already with plus or more than 4 days. Next slide, please. So some of the additional information that we got, because my presentation is actually focused on since October. So I got the latest as of within the week. So there's also equipment shortage across Southeast Asia and China, severely disrupting the shipping movements. So as I mentioned, Thailand, China, Singapore, Vietnam, Indonesia, and India are heavily affected because of the container space, as well as container availability, as well as vessel space issues. Situation in Australia and New Zealand are getting bad. And the latest one is actually the one from the US, from LA. So because of the port congestion in LA and the lack of truckers are causing major delays and increasing costs. Recently, the shipping lines are even asking for an additional $1,000 for all our shipments coming out of LA because of the issues on this one. And additional points that we need to consider, particularly for Q1 of 2020, is that we have to consider the Chinese New Year. We have to consider the post-Trump economics, as well as the one that was mentioned by our previous presenters about the vaccine, because this might be the priority shipments for next year, particularly for Q1, and then it will eat up space on the vessels. And on my last slide is actually some of the things that I wanted to share. Sorry, this is a typographical error. So what have we done so far? So for the imports, since, for example, for Nestle Philippines, we're heavy on importation. So what we did was we reviewed all covers of all our imported raw materials, imported finished goods, as well as our imported packaging materials. And we tried to increase it for around additional 2 to 3 weeks cover. So that should, in case there will be issues that we faced, we are still covered for our production requirement. This we started already, the increase in cover starting around May and June, because insight-wise, they're always telling us that global shipping will be worse in the next coming months. And then this is also in preparation, so in case the COVID will have the second wave. The second one that we did was actually to develop new suppliers. So for those that were heavily reliant on one supplier, so what we did was we developed new suppliers, not just within the country, but also from another country, because it's going to be difficult for us to develop another supplier of the same country, because should in case there will be lockdown in that country, so it's useless for the backup supplier. So what we did was we take a look at all the suppliers across all regions, if we can actually source from them as well. And then we advised our suppliers that booking should be done 2 to 3 months in advance. So it's not just about forecast, because what we did last year was we give quarterly forecast for all our shipping lines so that they can actually plan as well on the container availability and space. But because of what happened in the global on the global side, so what we did was we asked suppliers to really book in advance. So it has to have a booking conference, booking confirmation, so that we can actually be assured of the vessel space and container availability. For our export, so what we did was we give them a longer horizon for our forecast. So instead of only 3 months, so what we did, we give 6 months forecast to our shipping lines, so they can actually prepare as well for our exports. Aside from that 6 months forecast, we're booking 3 months in advance already, starting October of this year. So we already booked for our December shipments. And this month we're booking already for our January shipments in preparation for the Chinese New Year. Another thing that we've done as well is because of the issues on container availability, so we take a look at all our network. So all the importations, since we are a food company and we need to use food grade containers, so every time there's an import, so we're requesting for our shipping lines that this will actually be kept in either ATICD or LGICT, LGICT, as well as our external CYs, to actually keep the containers so that we can reuse it within the week or next, the following week for our export as well. And the last one that we did is we tried to reconsider now our criteria on container van, that instead of just using the food grade, we're now reconsidering if it's possible for us to use the grade A containers. That's it. It's just fast. So that's what we've done so far, and it's actually effective for us because we didn't have air freights as well in the past months. We didn't have production shut down. Good thing to note that despite the lockdown, the business of Nestle was also up because it's a basic necessity, so that's why it's good for us. We're still coping up with the demand, so that's why all our inventory should be up, and we have enough covers to support the increase in demand. That's it, guys. Back to you, Ochi.
Thank you very much, Dennis. So it's Milo every day. Continuous supply of Milo and other Nestle products. Thank you very much, Dennis. So our final speaker for this afternoon is the Assistant Commissioner of the Bureau of Customs, currently leading the agency's post-clearance audit group. So he's also the agency spokesperson and he previously worked as district collector for the Ninoy Aquino International Airport and then Manila International Container Port. So without further ado, let's all welcome Attorney Vincent Philip Maronilla.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to the members of the Supply Chain Management Association of the Philippines. I'll be presenting to you this afternoon an update on some of the accomplishments and, of course, some of the activities that are being undertaken by the Bureau of Customs in line with our trade facilitation initiatives and, of course, modernizing the customs processing system. So this accomplishment report is updated up to October 2020 or this year. So I'll be discussing our automation and modernization projects and the two programs that we're currently trying to promote for our stakeholders to actually engage in. First is the Authorized Economic Operator Program and, of course, the Advanced Ruling Program, both of which are already covered by existing regulations and we feel are underutilized. So we're trying heavily to promote these two trade facilitation initiatives. So next slide, please. Okay, for our automation project, I'll be discussing the current ICT systems being implemented by the Bureau of Customs. An update on the online tickets processed by the Bureau of Customs under our customer care portal system, a number of accreditation processed under the same system, and of course, the process of complying with the Ease of Doing Business Act under the Customer Care Center and other programs implemented. So let me start off with the BOC ICT systems being implemented. So right now, the Bureau of Customs is implementing several ICT projects, primary of which is the customer care portal system of the Bureau of Customs. So the CCPS is an online system that actually enables our stakeholders to electronically lodge and track the status of their inquiries, requests, and concerns. So previously, our system allows only for manual filing of entries, manual processing of inquiries, requests, and concerns. Now, even prior to the pandemic, we've actually been crafting a system which will allow us to engage our stakeholders online or electronically and do away with the common face-to-face transaction that is being implemented by the old custom system. This is both a modernization and, of course, an anti-corruption initiative coming from the Bureau of Customs. So right now, you can access our CCPS system, file your entries electronically, and of course, all your supporting documents, you can file them through the CCPS, attach them online, and have this both the E2M system and the TCPS system coexist, and therefore have a fully electronic processing of your shipments. Now, when you lodge through our CCPS system, you're given an online ticket. This online ticket will be your reference number in tracking your shipments and the transactions that you choose under the CCPS, whether it's a filing of a shipment for release, it's an inquiry or request, or it's for some other concerns. Now, another facet of this online ticketing system is that it creates an online conversation thread where the Bureau of Customs can monitor and our stakeholders can actually look into having an online conversation with the concerned offices and the concerned officer so that you can track the status of your shipments and at the same time provide for a feedback mechanism. Now, as you all know, we're venturing into a revision and an improvement of the current custom system. However, we do realize that this will take time. Now, pending this particular initiative, we opted to actually stabilize also our current systems so as not to affect current customs operations. So we ventured into a stabilization program of our current electronic to mobile system, or the E2M system. We've carried out E2M maintenance updates that resulted in the improvement of the overall performance, stability, and maintainability of the E2M system. So you all know this has been a lingering issue with the Bureau of Customs the often downtime and maintenance problem of the E2M system that is actually connected with its stability. So even pending current plans to revise the entire BOC system, we know that we also need to stabilize first our E2M system so that even if we're working on a new system, there will be less hassle and we would cater to the needs of our current stakeholders. We've also, of course, implemented also an electronic tracking and containerized cargo system, the e-track system. Now, this is a GPS-enabled system that allows us to track your cargoes real time, especially those for inland movements, and secure the transport of your cargoes, not just for the purpose of BOC border protection capabilities, but also for the security of the stakeholders as well. So we've started to implement this in our CBW and CYCFS container bound containers bound for these particular customs extensions and customs territory extensions. And unlike before that these cargoes need to be underguarded by BOC personnel, now all we need to do is actually attach a GPS system and we can track online the movement of your cargoes. We've also implemented an inventory management system for the CYCFS and CBWs. Now, as you all know, inventories of imported items that are being transferred to CYCFS and the common bonded warehouses previously were being managed manually, which provided for a lot of problems in terms of liquidation, tracking of inventories, commingling. Now, we've actually modernized this by implementing this IMS system that monitors real-time the status of import goods and raw materials transferred, stored, and withdrawn in warehouses to protect government revenues against technical smuggling. Now, currently, well, for about more than 10 years now, since the PAS 4 and PAS 5 system were actually adopted, the payment of duties and taxes with the Bureau of Customs has been online, meaning it's through an auto debit system through an authorized accredited bank which the particular account numbers or accounts of importers are nominated, and therefore by signal of the PAS 5 and before the PAS 4 system, auto debit is being made in payment of finally assessed duties and taxes. However, the problem remains with the payment for our miscellaneous and other administrative charges, as it remained manual, meaning you all have to fall in line, go to our respective cashiers for the payment of these miscellaneous expenses and miscellaneous fees. Now we've resolved that by actually partnering with the online platforms, online payment platforms, such as currently now PayMaya, to ensure that tax collection efficiency and seamless custom services are allowed online payment, especially those for miscellaneous fees. So now you can use PayMaya to actually pay, let's say, for example, your application for customs accreditation and other miscellaneous fees, which before you actually need to go through our cashier and pay. So we're initially using the PayMaya system because that's the first online payment system that we've actually entered into a memorandum of agreement with. But we're now negotiating also with the other payment platforms to provide our stakeholders more convenience. Like, for example, we're talking to GCash. We're also talking to Land Bank and the other banks if they can provide the Bureau of Customs and its stakeholders an online facility to pay their miscellaneous expenses. Previously, we had the value reference information system being implemented by the Import Assessment Service. We made this available electronically, and we've improved the current valuation system of the Bureau of Customs to promote more transparency, predictability, and consistency in the valuation reference of the Bureau of Customs. So right now, that's being Um, wait, I think is the admin is the
Okay, I think we lost our connection with Attorney Jet. But in the meantime, I hope you have some questions so that we can have them during our Q&A portion later. Okay, let's wait for Attorney Jet.
yeah, very sorry. I think I'm back, right? Okay, so sorry, I had a little technical problem a while ago. Okay, so next, we've actually also introduced a goods declaration and verification system. Now, this is a system that provides for the random assignment and selection of the different assessment offices that will handle your the processing of the shipments of our stakeholders. What it actually does is prevent familiarity with the stakeholder and the assigned customs examiner and appraisers to avoid any collusion and any issues that might arise in terms of proper valuation and classification of shipments. It's also a transparency tool that allows us to monitor the performance of our examiners and the appraisers in terms of, let's say, for example, consistency in treatment of goods that are being declared for them for release, even if these goods are belong to different kinds of classification. Now, to answer the perennial problem on balikbayan box and the parcel issues, we've introduced a balikbayan box and parcel tracking system that provides our stakeholders updates about the parcel or balikbayan box as it goes through the different stages of customs clearance, which also enables the Bureau to monitor the delivery of the efficiency of BOC officials and personnel in terms of handling and releasing balikbayan boxes and the parcels being sent by our OFWs and our family, members of our family that are living abroad, and everybody else that are sending goods through the balikbayan box and parcel system in the Bureau of Customs. As you all know, all goods that are being imported in the Philippines all go through a risk management system, which determines the kind of treatment in terms of examination, border protection, and some other forms of risk-based activity treatment that we will do against a particular shipment. So that is being guided by a risk management system. What we did is improve this particular system by introducing a universal risk management system that enables now risks and compliance prediction through an artificial intelligence tool promoting automation and lesser human intervention. Now, to solve the problem of perennial tracking of documents that are being submitted to the Bureau of Customs, we introduced a document tracking system. It now allows the monitoring and tracking of all documents received and generated by various offices of the Bureau of Customs to improve the processing time and in compliance with Republic Act number 11032, otherwise known as the Anti-Red Tape Act of otherwise known as Anti-Red Tape Act. Yeah. Okay, so next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay, now to give you an idea, we're presenting now the online system that we've introduced earlier, the customer care portal system. Now, as I said earlier, um, before you need to go through a manual face-to-face transaction with the Bureau of Customs and its personnel. Now we've eliminated that and introduced the customer care portal system, and tickets are being issued for this portal system, and the feedback mechanism is being made through those tickets. Now, to give you a general idea, I'm presenting the numbers for the totality of the tickets processed by the Bureau of Customs, and the kind of concerns that were chosen by our stakeholders in terms of usage of the CCPS system. I'm also providing you with the average response time of the Bureau of Customs and the average resolution time. Also provided in this particular slide, as you can see, is the number of accreditation processed by the Bureau of Customs. Next slide, please. Now, as part of our ease of doing business initiatives, we've established a customer care center in all our ports, in all our major ports, in all our ports in the major ports in the Bureau of Customs. So as you can see, 14 out of the 17 BOC ports are now equipped with a customer care center. Now, what is the customer care center? It's actually a one-stop shop that provides for all your needs in the port level. You don't need to go inside the ports anymore. If there is a need to actually follow up or submit certain documents or make a personal appearance to transact with some other aspects of customs operations that cannot be addressed by the customer care portal system, you don't need to go to the ports anymore and go to the different offices there. All you need to go to is this one center that is provided in all our ports, the customer care center, and it provides you with all avenues of resolution of all your concerns. So right now, as I said, we have that on 14 of our 17 major ports, and the other 3 are being launched soon. Now, for the Port of Manila customer care portal system, which is the very first CCC office that was established, we're actually just waiting for the awarding of the certificate of ISO 9001-2015 certification to certify for the standard by which these CCCs will operate. And then all CCCs are actually going through the same process to ensure that the standard by which these customer care centers will operate and will cater to the public within the ISO standard. Next slide, please. Now, as you all know, we also engaged the World Bank into a loan to modernize the entire custom system. So we were granted an $80 million loan by the World Bank to modernize the entire customs processing system. So it's a big part of the customs modernization program, as it will cover a revamp and a revitalization of the entire customs system, doing away with the old system now. As I told you earlier, that while we ventured into an E2M stabilization program, we were also preparing for this particular program, the modernization program of the Bureau of Customs. We've just been notified of the grant, the approval of the grant by the World Bank or the loan, and now we're preparing for the bid documents and the bidding process for the different facets of the customs modernization program. Now, we've also worked with the WCO Mercator program to align the Bureau of Customs processes to global benchmarks or global best practices. Now, what is the Mercator program? It's a program being implemented by the World Customs Organization, helping out different customs organizations to actually align some of their procedures and processes with the with the World Trade Organization Agreement on Trade Facilitation and other customs best practices as established by the WCO. Now, I know this has been a long issue for the Bureau of Customs, but finally, we were able to request, and that request was granted by the Anti-Red Tape Authority to lead the revitalization of the National Single Window Program. Right now, DOF is working on a TradeNet initiative, which we feel will be part of the which will be a vital part of the bringing back into fold of the National Single Window Initiative, and this is now being worked on by the Bureau of Customs together with the Department of Finance, our other regulatory agencies, and of course under the lead of the Anti-Red Tape Authority. Several agencies have expressed their interest in linking with the TradeNet project, which is technically now the main platform that will cater to the National Single Window Program. I think 4 agencies will be on board by this year, and 15 other agencies will be on board by next year. Next slide, please. We also established a Customs Operations Center, which is a facility that utilizes various computer applications, dashboard, display, and communication systems to monitor customs operations and consolidate customs data. It provides a unified oversight and situational awareness in managing incidents and mitigate organizational risks. It operates on a 24/7 basis to ensure that continuous monitoring and delivery of custom services are unhampered. As again, other than an ISO certification initiative for our customer care center, we're also venturing into an ISO certification initiative for all our ports. The Port of Batangas has it already. The customer care center of the Port of Manila is starting it for the POM. And 2 more ISO 9001-2015 certifications for the subport of Dumaguete and the subport of Mactan is on its way. Now, 10 units and offices are also now in various stages of the certification process. Next slide, please. Okay, now on to like I said earlier, the 2 programs that we wanted to emphasize, especially at this point in the customs modernization efforts. And first is, of course, finally, we have an authorized economic operator program. This was launched this year, and a dedicated office under Assessment Operations and Coordinating Group has been established and is managing this particular program. So next slide, please. Okay, to provide you a brief history of the AEO. As you all know, the AEO it was established by the WCO through its SAFE framework, or a framework of standards to secure and facilitate global trade. It was initially a reaction by the WCO, by the country members of the WCO, for what happened in 9/11 in the United States. So it was primarily aimed at securing goods that are being brought in to from other countries to the other more progressive countries. But it quickly developed from a security measure to a trade facilitation measure. And therefore, a lot of the trusted trader programs now that you see from other customs authorities are actually based on the SAFE framework and based on an AEO concept. In the Philippines, the basis is, of course, Customs Administrative Order 1-2012, as revised by Customs Administrative Order 4-2013, and CMO 11-2012 and CMO 14-2013 initially. So these were the ones that covered it. Now, a change in the environment and a change in the treatment of the AEO program brought about the issuance of number 5-2017, establishing the AEO. And of course, this particular cow is now the latest regulation that actually is referencing the implementation of an AEO program by the Bureau of Customs. Next slide, please. Now, what's an economic, for those who doesn't, I'm sure everybody in SCMAP knows what an AEO is, but just the same, AEO actually refers to importers or exporters or customs brokers, forwarders, freight forwarders, transport provider, and other entities. So it's not solely referring to one particular facet of trade, of the supply chain trade. It's not solely, unlike, let's say, for example, the Super Green Lane program, which is the nearest program that we can actually look into in terms of what an AEO is. An AEO is more broad in scope, and it's not only concentrated on an importer exporter. It's concentrated on the entire facets of trade, of the trade network. Now, these entities will be duly accredited by the Bureau of Customs based on the SAFE framework, and of course, the revised Kyoto Convention and the WCO supply chain management guidelines and other various national best practices. Now, the goal is to promote trade facilitation and to provide seamless movement of goods across border through a secure international supply chain with the use of risk management and modern technology. Next slide, please. So again, as you all know, as I said earlier, it covers a whole array of players in the trade area. So even shipping lines and other airlines, authorized agent banks, foreign shipping lines will be covered by regulations covering the AEO program. And it doesn't end with CAO 5-2017 as this will be expanded when we implement the level, when you're a member and we implement level 2 of the AEO program, which will now allow certain conditions and certain agreements under the mutual recognition arrangements that we will enter into with other countries. Next slide, please. So the AEO program in the Philippines has 3 levels. First is that we accredit. Number 2, we validate. And the third level, we provide best practices and the pioneers of the AEO. The accreditation process usually involves a pre-screening of the application, of course, an evaluation, and then approval and denial. We revalidate, and then again we approve and deny. The initial approval, of course, is for the level 1, and then if you want to go to the level 2, where you can avail yourself the benefits under the mutual recognition arrangements, then you can ask for a revalidation. Let me just emphasize that under current regulations and under current policies that are being forwarded by the current customs administration, we're actually providing the current SGL members with the opportunity to pre-qualify under the first level of the AEO program. So SGL members are going to be invited and will pre-qualify under the first level of the AEO program, since the benefits under the Super Green Lane program and that of the first level AEO are akin to each other. Now, if these SGL members that are going to apply and pre-qualify for the first level wants to go to the second level, then they will have to go through a revalidation process. Next slide, please. Now, onto the advanced ruling on customs valuation and rules of origin. We actually have 3 kinds of advanced ruling here in the Philippines in terms of customs processing. First is the customs valuation on advanced ruling on customs valuation. Second is the advanced ruling on rules of origin, and third is the advanced ruling on classification. Now, the Bureau of Customs only handles valuation and rules of origin. As you all know, advanced ruling classification is being handled by the Tariff Commission. So next slide, please. Now, what is an advanced ruling? An advanced ruling is an official, written, and binding ruling issued by the Bureau of Customs, which provides the requesting person with an assessment of, first, the origin status of his shipment, whether it's for preferential or non-preferential, the treatment to be applied on a certain element of customs value prior to an import or export transaction for a specified period. Next. Now, why do you need, what would be your benefit if you would apply for an advanced ruling? Number one, you would have certainty and predictability to the trade issues of your shipments. Number two, you will have better benefits for greater certainty regarding duty liability. And of course, it promotes trade facilitation, transparency, consistency, and ease of doing business in customs operations, and foster the participation of small, medium-sized enterprises in global commerce. And more importantly, if you have an advanced ruling and you do away with some of the other issues that might hound your goods when they enter in the Philippines, you get to avoid delays in the clearance of goods due to unnecessary disputes. Next slide, please. Now, what are the features of advanced ruling? First, it is a binding ruling that binds the Bureau of Customs for a period of 3 calendar years, provided that there is no change in the facts and circumstances as represented by the applicant. And unlike the Super Green Lane program, no prior accreditation is required. Next slide, please. Now, advanced ruling on valuation applies to the proper application of goods valuation done prior to its actual importation or exportation, as the case may be. An importer or exporter or authorized agent must request it at least 90 days before the date of the shipment. Next slide, please. Now, for rules of origin, it is a customs ruling on the appropriate application of preferential and non-preferential rules of origin issued prior to importation or exportation, whichever is applicable. Next slide, please. So this is the normal process when you actually apply for advanced ruling. You submit your request. There's an initial check or evaluation, then a review and endorsement of the advanced ruling. And then, of course, after that, if it's favorable, an issuance of the advanced ruling by the commissioner, and we publish it without actually providing for the sensitive information that are proprietary, like the names of the companies and the names of the suppliers. Next slide, please. Yep. So I think that puts an end to the presentation, my presentation. I hope everyone was able to get something out of it, and I'm open to any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Attorney Jet Maronilla, for that informative presentation and for allowing us to know about the initiatives of the Bureau of Customs on the steps to have an easier transaction with your agency, and also for the trade facilitation of our member companies. Okay, so we now move on to our open forum. I think we can have 3 questions. So I have here the first question. Okay, so this is for Attorney Jet. Okay, so we know that you now have the customer care portal. So has there been any feedback on the level of key client satisfaction in transacting in the system?
I think because it has been in implementation for quite some time already. In fact, we've utilized this very heavily because of the pandemic. I think our stakeholders has gotten the hang of using the customer care portal system. The only complaints that we get now are actually more on the feedback mechanism. When some of our personnel, because we still lack personnel. That's why we're venturing into filling up the entire plantilla position available at the Bureau of Customs. We're hiring another 1,000 this year. So I think because of that initiative, we will be able to address that particular issue. Right now, the only feedback that we get are actually more on the speed by which some transactions are being replied to. But generally, feedback from our stakeholders, from the chambers, have been very positive in terms of the usage of the customer care portal system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So,
okay.
So then
can I ask a question to Attorney Jet as well? You mentioned,
yes,
Attorney, that the SGL companies will be pre-qualified for the AEO. Like for example, for Nestle, we're part of the SGL team. Are we just going to wait for the advice from the customs regarding on how we're going to proceed with the AEO application?
Yes, or you can inquire with the AEO office under AOCG. But we're actually discussing providing the SGL members with an initial invitation letter for them to avail of the first level of AEO. And that will not prevent you from actually exercising your right as an SGL. We'll just give you another code that you can actually I can sparingly use if you want to try processing your shipment under the first level of the AEO. Then you use this code, and of course the normal code that you have under the SGL program will still be available for you.
Okay, so we'll coordinate with AOCG for this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a question here regarding the availability of cold chain service providers once the vaccine is available. Would any of our panelists have any information about that?
I think
Marilyn,
I think it's better kung yung cold chain association ang matanong natin about this, no? Although of course, as I've said earlier, in terms of yung sa arrival at the airport, I was advised by Pierre that they are expanding their cold storage facility, no? And yung availability niyan would also depend, kasi kumbaga, how much is needed ba talaga? It will also be depending on the volume and the packaging. Kasi kung if it will be very volumetric, no, taking too much space, then definitely more space will be required. And also in terms of temperature requirement, depende din yun. Kasi for example, kung Pfizer ang bibilin, negative 70 degrees, wala halos napakaliit ng possibility na it can really be served. But for example, kung yung sa AstraZeneca, which is parang refrigerator lang yung yung temperature niya, then I think the options will be much more in terms of storage. Although I've talked to some of service providers who are handling vaccines na rin. I mean, not necessarily COVID-19 vaccines. They're already preparing also even yung sa packaging, no? Even if, for example, kumbaga parang in addition to usage of reefer trucks or reefer containers.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn. So, in terms of the readiness of the Bureau of Customs on when this vaccine is available, it was mentioned earlier about the humanitarian goods clearance. Will having this vaccine be tax exempt? Would you know, or any of the panelists respond to that?
I think that needs to be clarified by the Department of Finance. And unfortunately, the Bureau of Customs is in no position to determine whether a particular item is tax-free or not. It's solely determined by law. But we'll look into Bayanihan. I don't know if the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act will still be effective by the time this particular vaccines are on its way here. But maybe we can look into that, or maybe we can ask for some remedial measures to be implemented by Congress, much like this Bayanihan to Heal as One Act and to Recover as One Act, for vaccines to be declared as tax-free.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Chet. So, are there any more questions? How about our
Uchi?
Yes,
Can
please,
I
yes,
ask?
please.
Just a clarification from Attorney Jet Maronilla regarding dun sa AEO implementation natin. Since we have an existing AEO-like accreditation, yung ating SGL and SGL Plus, if these companies are transitioning to AEO now and in the future, magiging isa na lang ba to? AEO na lang sila lahat, wala na yung SGL and SGL Plus?
Sir, that's the long-term goal of the Bureau of Customs. So that we can promote and we will have only one trusted trader program that we can monitor and improve on. Anyway, the first level, that's why consciously the Bureau of Customs provided for all the same benefits of an SGL to the first level of the AEO, so that when we transition, hindi po maninibago yung mga SGL members natin.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Jet. Uchi, just one more comment
Yes,
lang.
please.
Yung question kanina about dun sa availability ng ating mga cold chain facilities. I think because most of the warehouses actually are under the supervision of DTI also. So I think it's very important. Ito, matagal ng project to ng LSP8, sinusulong ni Marilyn to yung ating observatory. Diba?
Yes.
I think as early as now, we should have an inventory of our available assets in terms of handling this type of commodities. So ano ba yung mga available cold chain facilities natin, not only in Metro Manila, but especially in the cities. And aside from that, yung connection, kasi magkakaroon to ng ng handshake, diba? From the planes to the warehouses, from the warehouses doon sa mga transport facilities. Yung bang mga sasakyan natin, meron ba tayong available din na pwede nating pagsakyan na meron siyang refrigerated na mga vans, yung mga vans natin na maliliit.
Okay. Thank you, Sam, for your input. So I guess we have answered already all the questions.
Hey,
Last
ako,
thoughts,
pwede
please.
magtanong kay, ano,
Yes, please. Yes,
pwede
please.
kay
I'm sorry.
Attorney Vincent
Yeah, please.
Maronilla. Oo.
Yeah, pa.
Yeah, attorney, tanong ko lang, may timetable kayo for AEO ano din accreditation ng freight forwarders?
Good.
I think, ma'am, I think right now we're accepting it already.
Pwede na.
I think the AOCG office, yes, ma'am, wala naman siyang distinction na ibinigay. I think when we drafted the CAO, and we also provided for the standards for all the players in the trade industry. So I think even those that are not importers, or let's say for example yung siya, pwede siyang ma-accredit po.
Parang uunahin lang muna yung mga importers.
Yes, ma'am. Pwede po. Pwede na po siya mag-apply.
Thank you.
Okay. We have one more question from Romina Pablo. So how long will the container availability issue forecast persist? No? So parang up to when? Will it eventually cause unavailability of containers for exporters? Or is the country's trade imbalance for imports for every one export help ensure there will be available containers for use of exporters? So,
Well, I can answer, Auchi, for a few.
yes, please.
When we were talking about it with our global logistics as well, who are based in Malaysia and Panama, so they're predicting it until Q1 of next year. That's going to happen. Though there were some indications that the cost will still be high, but at least the balance on availability would still be until Q1 of next year. Now, internally for Philippines, I think what we are promoting now is that since we have a lot of importation coming in, so we need to reuse most of our containers for export. We just need to align of what we're going to do. For example, there are some exporters who are food companies who are very strict on their requirements. So it has to be arranged, trying to look at your import list if what we can reuse actually for export. We have these facilities already in Luzon, like for example for ATI ICD, for LG ICTs as well, and even for external CYs that you can actually reuse. We can stage containers and it eventually be reused as well. Shipping lines, based on our discussions, are encouraging reuse of containers so that the containers will not stay in the Philippines.
Okay. Thank you very much for your insight, Dennis. So any more questions before we close our 5th edition of SCMAP Live? Any more questions? So final thoughts from our resource speakers and panelists. Is there a silver lining for trade in the Philippines post-COVID-19? Anyone cares to?
Siyempre, we always have to have
Yeah.
optimism.
Yeah, of course.
Oo, kumbaga parang, this is just a phase that, we have to go through and lahat naman ng countries, no? But eventually, of course, we will rise from this problem. So there is a silver lining.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Marilyn. Okay, next.
Yes.
Sir Sam.
Yeah, if you are going to go back to my presentation, yung first slide ko,
Okay.
doon sa baba, meron dong sunrise. I've been seeing sunrise in the last 7 months, and I'm still positive. As I presented kanina on the side of the regulatory, and if you're going to compare my presentation with that of the presentation made by Attorney Jet Maronilla, so talagang active naman yung ating regulatory side, yung gobyerno natin sa pagsunod doon sa ating mga pinirmahang provision sa TFA. Of course, we have different views on the notification and the aspect of implementation. As mentioned by Attorney Jet Maronilla, may mga shortcomings because of course, the challenges, especially doon sa digital part ng customs. I work with customs in 2015 and 2016 together with Attorney Jet. At doon ko nakita ang side, bakit hindi pwede kagad. So it's a good sign now that the World Bank have given us loan and finally mai-implement na talaga yung technical part ng ating customs modernization. We already laid down the regulatory framework dahil dun sa pagpasa ng CMTA. And we hope tuloy-tuloy na yung ating trade facilitation. Thank you.
Okay. How about Attorney Jet? And Sir Dennis?
Yeah, well yung ano namin kami, well, our figures are, when we look at the figures, trade importations are up, slowly are getting back to normal. I don't know if it's the same product or there's an evolution of the product because of the situation now. But slowly, the level of imports that are being brought in are rising. I can't say the same, of course, for exports kasi medyo mas challenging yun. But more than that, I think more than how we actually bring in, we need to be active also in looking out for the other facets of our economy. Siguro kami, dahil kami ni Sir Sam, pareho kami nasa bureau din dati si Sir Sam, nakikita namin kung yung pagbabago nung trade environment in terms of the products that are being brought in. I'll just give you an example. When we negotiated for these free trade agreements, when we looked into the auto industry, ang tiningnan lang natin dyan, Japan and Korea, usap tayo. But look at how it's affecting us now. All the major manufacturers are shifted back to Thailand, Indonesia, and all the ASEAN countries, bringing the tariff level of cars that are being imported to the Philippines at zero. Ang in-anticipate natin 5% kasi sabi natin ang manufacturers nito traditionally are the Japanese and the Koreans. At kung itong mga to dilipat dito sa ASEAN, sigurado yung Pilipinas, mapupunta tayo dun sa mga countries na magiging competitive in terms of manufacturing. But they're not here. They're actually in Thailand. They're actually in Malaysia. So I think for us to be able to be competitive trade-wise and not just be dependent on imports, our entire economic situation should also be as competitive as these countries, because it's no longer true that one country has an expertise in building a particular product. Right now, it's very global. China, for one, is building everything, and our ASEAN neighbors are building everything. Right now the most of our imports are coming from ASEAN, and the first country in ASEAN that we have a very high volume of imports is Indonesia, and we've not seen that coming. So I think we also need to evolve, as some of our neighbors have already evolved, and not just in terms of the trade facilitation measures that we implement, but overall on the entire economic policies that we're implementing and providing opportunities for investors to actually come into the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Attorney Jet.
Okay, actually on the shipper side as well, for example, for the food manufacturer, of course, there's always been a hope. I think what we just need to look at what is now the trend. So we might need to look at our product portfolio. So if we used to be reliant on or maybe on our heavy brands that are not selling now, but there are brands that are already rising. There are a lot of industries or categories that are now picking up because of all these change in the way how consumers are actually spending their money now. So that's one of the things that we need to take a look at. And on the importation side, I think one of the things that we're also looking at, if it's possible that we can actually source some of our raw materials locally. So it's not just about helping our farmers or helping our local companies in the Philippines, but also try to come up with a stable supply, not just dependent on the importations as well. So these are just some of the things that we're trying to look at to make sure that it's actually helping us, not just helping us, but also helping the local companies as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dennis. So that brings to a close our 5th edition of SCMAP Live. Again, we would like to express our appreciation for our resource speakers for this afternoon, Ms. Marilyn Alberto, Ambassador Sam Bautista, Dennis Llovido, and Assistant Commissioner Attorney Philip Maronilla. So for our participants on Zoom, an online feedback form will open on your browser once you leave the webinar. We would also appreciate your thoughts so we can mount better events for you. So finally, you can keep up to date with what you are doing here at SCMAP by visiting our website, scmap.org, and by following us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So on behalf of everyone here at SCMAP, I am Ana Rosa Ochoa, your program director, thanking you once again for joining us and hope to see you again in our future events for the year. Thank you very much. God bless us all.